It was interesting. So for a number of years before I joined Rollworks, I was running teams for PR agencies, and during COVID, anything sent direct home was really a no-go. But when you flip it from a B2B standpoint and you're prospecting, people will really embrace it with open arms. One of the most creative things I saw us do, and we sort of shared this with customers too, was a chicken soup campaign. So when we started to get a high volume of out of office replies, we turned it into a gifting campaign and sent emails to say, hey, we don't know why you're out of office. We're not asking why, but if you happen to need a pick me up because you're under the weather, have some soup and a meal on us. And the response to that was incredible. Just that, I think, the person to person touch of, oh, you really care about me, right? That level of personalization comes in rather than, oh, I see you watching me, right? It's different.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the eMarketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I'm here today with Sara Ajemian, who runs marketing for Rollworks, which is a division of Nextroll. And she's in a unique position to being out there representing a B2B marketing company and having to do B2B marketing herself. So that, I think, gives her a unique perspective on the challenges we all face when it comes to B2B marketing. So to start off with, before we do sort of the elevator pitch of Rollworks, why don't you let me know if there are any sort of B2B campaigns you really like? It could either be a client or it could just be one that you thought was particularly well done.
Yeah, there's two that come to mind. I'd say one big, one small. The big one is HubSpot's campaign with Catherine Hahn. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but it was the Set Sail campaign, and I thought it was really clever. I think they took the tag was HubSpot took my pirate business from ugh to arg. And to me, it was really simple, but they did a great job with it, and she felt like the perfect character to cast in that role. But what's interesting, I don't think that they did a ton of outbound press around it, or if they did, I missed it. So I just stumbled across it direct on their website. And I thought it was a nice way to take the brand from maybe where they have always been and sort of hooking into inbound and just giving a fun spin to it. So that was really clever. And then another one is a company called FormStack. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're a former client of mine when I was on the PR agency side. And they created a super simple campaign called Practically Genius. And the idea behind it was just to highlight the small things that people did that were just genius moments. So it felt more like an embracing of realistic things that people do in their everyday lives versus this big campaign that sometimes I think people feel like campaigns have to be huge and really impactful, but it took it down and just said, let's take a step back. Let's just highlight people for doing great things in their jobs in the everyday moments. And they spun it into a social campaign, and I think it had some awards, and they've really hooked into it from a framework. So I like that. I like that play from a campaign standpoint on people and humanity and celebrating the small wins.
Great. Well, I'm going to have to go dig that one up because it sounds like it came across somewhat authentic.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Thanks. And as far as the Rollworks elevator pitch, what is that these days? So what do your teams go out there, and what is your messaging with regards to sort of getting your pitch across in the shortest amount of time?
Yeah, I think the easiest way that we explain Rollworks is that we're an account-based platform that's really built for modern B2B marketers. So that idea of modern B2B marketer is really broadly interpreted. But I think what stands out for us when we compare to other solutions in the market is that we have kind of embraced this idea that ABM is really not a one-size-fits-all thing. It's sort of whatever you need it to be, however you need it to be. So we flex down to, scale up startups and through to the enterprise, which I think works well. We're easily implemented, and if you're just starting out and you're sort of a marketing team of one, or if you've got this really robust program at the enterprise level and you've been doing ABM for a long time, or we're able to help you sort of make more sophisticated motions in the market. I think we also stand out for maybe three other things. We've got sort of the advertising reach and legacy of Nextroll that we were, obviously born out of. HubSpot is a huge integration for us and a huge partner in our app there is really critical for a lot of businesses. And I think our partner ecosystem is broadening and quickly expanding. So lots more to come there in 2023.
Great. Thanks for the synopsis on that. So certainly, you mentioned company sizes. You guys fit in all sorts of different company sizes. Another thing that's somewhat unique in the B2B category is that, obviously there are lots of different types of B2B, different industries. Some are products, some are services. And so that means that the sales cycle could look quite different, right, those different industries. So how do your clients deploy your solution given that diversity in the way in which they're making sales and the way in which they're getting their message out? How does that differ based on length of sales cycle, what type of industry or product versus service?
Yeah, it really depends on the sector they're in and sort of the goals of the marketing team. I think a lot of our clients have the same challenges. So there's a lot of commonality across industries. You're trying to generate leads. You're trying to sort of bridge the divide between sales and marketing. So there's a lot of cross-industry learnings that we can share. There are some more specific. So if we have customers, for example, in the healthcare industry, there's a lot more scrutiny placed on when and how they need to connect with prospects. But by and large, I think the trend from a ABM standpoint is very much sort of bespoke and custom. What do we need to do? How do we need to get it done? And who do we need to reach? And again, I mean, like I said, there's definitely differences in the way you get that done, but I've been surprised since joining Rollworks this year and the commonalities you see.
So one of the sort of things that was a big driver, I think, for sort of ABM becoming sort of a new acronym in B2B marketing was sort of the myth of the single decision maker. May have been a myth the whole time, but I think it became really clear in the last 5 or 10 years, like, okay, people are probably making decisions as committees, right? And given that they're forming a committee and they're that sort of thinking through, like, okay, how do we go through the selection process? How do we weed down all the players we're going to consider? How do ABM marketers deal with that? The internal influencers, sometimes that internal influencer only has veto power. Like, they can't actually decide anything, but they can quash it, right? So that's a pretty complicated ecosystem to deal with as a B2B marketer, right? You've got all the positive influencers, then you've got veto power. Then maybe there is, in fact, speaking of veto, there was a book called Veto, the very important something. I can't remember, the sales book talking selling to veto. I can't remember what the acronym was for, but there isn't really necessarily a single decision maker for a lot of these things. And has that changed the way in which your clients are deploying ABM?
I think yes and no. I think there's a lot more focus on personalization, but not sort of big, scary capital P personalization.
Right.
There's a lot of following the journey. So we help our customers with their journey mapping and personalization through that lens. What are they reading? What are they looking at? What are they searching? What's their intent? What are all of the signals showing us? And how do we sort of help either guide them through to that next step, whether that's maybe an automated nurture campaign or something of the like, or are we coming at it from the other side? What campaigns are we putting out there? And maybe where are they meeting in the middle to find that? But I think you're definitely putting yourself at a fault if you're only going through one persona and you're not trying to reach that full decision maker. But a lot of it just a lot of it comes down to the data. Again, what are they seeing? What are they looking at? What are they reacting to? And how are we pushing them through that?
Great, thanks. In recessions in the past, it has lengthened the B2B sales cycle for some industries, and that may happen next year. Nobody knows. Next year is right around the corner. So
I can't believe it.
And we'll probably end up publishing this next year, so it'll be this year by the time everyone gets a chance to listen and watch. So, given that sales cycles may lengthen, right? Does that change what you guys recommend from a strategic perspective on ABM? That you may want to change messaging, or you may want to change choreography or cadence or anything?
It's probably more I like that idea of choreography and cadence. I might take that. I think that's definitely right. Buyers are still consuming the same types of information. The topics may change, right? You might take a look at the fact that they've consumed one ebook 2 months ago, and then maybe they've come back to look at another one in a couple weeks. So trying to figure out how to help maybe change the stream they're in or put them on a different path. We do a lot of nurture campaigns here at Rollworks, and thinking through where they are in the funnel, where they are in the cycle. Have they stalled? Have they not stalled? Do they need a push? Do they need another push? You sort of play around with, I'd say, the minutia of the data and figuring out where people are, and then also where they either need to go or where they need to drop off. And if they drop off, then that's okay. You just put your efforts elsewhere. But I do think there has to be a lot more flexibility and a lot more reality. I'm a big proponent of realistic optimism, but I think we all have to go into the sort of 2023 with a focus on efficiency, with fresh thinking and new eyes, and definitely a new perspective on the way that people are going to be thinking about how they buy products and services next year.
I noticed in your profile that I think you mentioned storytelling, right? So people don't usually think of storytelling as a B2B thing, more of a B2C thing, but whether it's SaaS-based B2B or other forms of B2B marketing, how do you feel storytelling fits into that?
Well, I think we're all people at the end of the day. I think somewhere along the lines, B2B companies really moved away from reaching people, and B2C companies definitely go all in on the consumer persona, but we are all people who experience life and engage with things in the same ways. And so I think storytelling from a B2B standpoint is really critical. And I think back to that Practically Genius campaign, right? It doesn't have to be this big ocean moving narrative. It could just be, what is that tiny piece of info that we have, or that tiny nugget of aha moment that we can pull out, and what's the tension between where you need to go and how you get there. And I think those are the easiest ways to bring storytelling in. And the good thing about the way that ABM works is that you have more channels to do that. And so are we thinking about creative email campaign? Is it a tiny piece of advertising? But how do you connect the dots between all of those things so that the experience is really fully thought out, rather than just sort of moments in time that don't connect to each other?
For B2C clients or customers or whatever, brands often get the advantage of having something interesting to talk about, right? And some B2B categories maybe a little bit more boring, right? And so the creative still needs to figure out how to break through.
Yeah.
Right? So, people don't usually think of creativity. I mean, you used a couple of examples of sort of creative that you felt broke through in a B2B ecosystem, but, how do you break through the clutter as a B2B marketer, using creative? Because if you're going to go through the trouble of buying those ad impressions, you want to make sure that they don't go to waste.
Yeah, exactly. I personally rely on a lot of data. I think that data is highly underutilized, particularly if, again, you sort of think about the thing that's going to catch someone's eye. Oh, I didn't know that, only 27% of people do this, or I didn't know that I could generate 4x more this if I do this thing, right? I think it's sort of giving them just a touch of FOMO, we call it, to say, oh, I didn't know that. I want to learn more. Oh, that's me. Oh, that's not me. I'm good at this, but maybe I want to see how much better I could be. I think there are a lot of ways to do that. And, I think categories are only boring because they're made to seem boring, right? You think about very traditional B2B software, call center technology, things like that don't get a lot of attention because they're not marketing or they're not sort of front and center. I think those areas are really fun because you have more of a creative challenge, and you've really got to figure out how to get people's attention, versus things like RevTech, for example, companies like Gong, and there's a lot of opportunity to just be creative out of the gate because you've got a rich amount of data and people's minds are already there. So it could work for you and can work against you to be in a quote unquote boring industry.
Right. Pre-pandemic B2B marketers relied pretty heavily on trade shows and conferences and events. Then, of course, they went away for the most part during the pandemic. Some tried to go virtual, but it seems like events are sort of back. So, when folks are going to be sort of reintroducing events into their marketing mix, or maybe yourself as well, does that change your recommendations on how to execute ABM?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think the same approach still stands in trying to just sort of build awareness. We had a pretty massive investment at Inbound this year, which was awesome. And it was definitely a test of resources and kind of creative power after COVID to see what we could do and what people were interested in. But I think the thing that stands the test of time is sort of the awareness factor. So it's all fine and good to put a lot of effort into a great presence, but if nobody knows you're going to be there or what you're doing there or how to interact with you, right? The investment can fall short. So I think the same power of ABM in terms of, we call it air cover, right? The air cover for whatever you're going after is really critical. And that's not going to change. But I do think one thing that we have seen that is changing is the appetite for everyone else to go to events. So as a business, the appetite is definitely there, but it takes a lot to encourage people to go or to show up or to have meetings, because there still is very much, I think, a tension, maybe not a tension, but a hesitation. I want to get back out there. I don't necessarily want to get sick, or I want to travel. I don't want to do this. And I think the world is just different.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's this next year will be a really test case, right? For, is it back to normal? Is it the new normal? What does the new normal look like on events? So it'll be fascinating.
Yeah, we I was just going to pull up a stat for you. We did a small survey, I think of about 1,000 B2B marketers. Maybe 2 months ago, we fielded it, and we asked, which channel do you think has the most potential for incremental gain in 2023? And 11% of people said event marketing. Now that sort of fell toward the bottom of the list. The people are still going, but I think there is more appetite for in-person than virtual, because I think the loss of in-person sort of pushed virtual events on an accelerated path, and we're maybe all a little bit burnt out on that.
So I have to ask, what were the top ones on the list, right?
The top ones on the list. Partnership marketing, paid social was high, and content marketing. So I think email marketing was up there too. So you start to see kind of what we've proven out a bit this year from our own business. Partnerships, as people come back to maybe not best in breed, but best of class and best in class with the ecosystem, but the channels to connect with people where they are rather than trying to get them to be somewhere else.
Right. Well, that's great advice. One thing we've had success for our B2B clients, starting into the pandemic, but continuing now post-pandemic, is for the B2B folks on our list. When we do direct mail, we also direct mail their home postal address, not just their work postal address, because it gives us sort of two bites at the apple. Given the work from home revolution and sort of the digital footprint of people, and people are sometimes at work and on their VPNs, and so you can somewhat target them that way. But when they're not, are there any ramifications to that, to your strategies, both for marketing yourselves and also for clients?
There are some, but actually I think we found a lot more opportunity in direct mail from work from home. I think just because it affords a little bit more creativity. It was interesting. So for a number of years before I joined Rollworks, I was running teams for PR agencies, and during COVID, anything sent direct home was really a no-go. But when you flip it from a B2B standpoint and you're prospecting, people will really embrace it with open arms. One of the most creative things I saw us do, and we sort of shared this with customers too, was a chicken soup campaign. So when we started to get a high volume of out of office replies, we turned it into a gifting campaign and sent emails to say, hey, we don't know why you're out of office. We're not asking why. But if you happen to need a pick-me-up because you're under the weather, have some soup and a meal on us. And the response to that was incredible. Just that, I think, the person-to-person touch of, oh, you really care about me, right? That level of personalization comes in rather than, oh, I see you watching me, right? It's different.
Right.
And regardless of whether it moved people through our funnel or not, the responses were just overwhelming. Thank you so much. This was so well timed. I actually am sick and could use this. And I think it just brought a bit of, goodwill and hope at a time where I think people need it. Not to be overly, enthusiastic about it. It was just a great campaign, but I do think there are opportunities for that type of creativity to come in, and also just the lowering of the veil of perfectionism to where humanity and people just being people at home and at work is a nice new normal.
Yeah, I think that's one other thing that's really a little bit different in the B2B ecosystem is, when you've got humans on your side doing the marketing, right? You can, even if you semi-automated that, right? The idea
Yeah.
is that a person had to decide, do I want to put this person on the chicken soup list, right? Or not,
Yeah.
right? And I think empowering sales teams to be even more creative, like rather than just make it boilerplate, right? To allow them to use information that they glean or gather as a result of a social media post or something else, right? To sort of reach out and personalize it, but again, not in a creepy way, right?
Yeah, it's a nice
That's
conversation starter where we've got a personalization channel in Slack where our sales reps talk about and share emails and sort of talk about the ways that they won from personalizing. And I've seen everything from Taylor Swift and wrestling through to, learning a new language. And it's again, it's just that right touch of, hey, I care about you, and this is what I've learned about you, and this is how I might connect with you, because something shifts when you find a commonality, no matter how small it is, just to say, okay, like that was a really nice chat. I appreciate it. And then we go from there. But I do think that's one thing that excites me about next year for sure.
great. I'd love you to also comment a little bit on the differences in B2B. The Venn diagrams of sales and marketing are a little bit more overlapped, right? In B2C, I mean, they're really almost, there's a little overlap in the Venn diagram between sales and marketing, but they can be quite heavily overlapped at some organizations in B2B, where the marketing team is really almost enmeshed with the sales team.
Okay. At Rollworks, our sales and marketing efforts are so intertwined that it's hard to think about where one starts and where one ends. And that works for us because our marketing efforts really have to drive our sales interactions. And we embrace that very much through the ABM mentality, right? Not just from an air cover standpoint where our sales teams are reaching out, but how do we take the data we have and the platform that we offer to our customers and use it for our own learning. We often have a lot of companies coming in saying that the sales and marketing alignment is broken, needs to be fixed, and they don't know how to do it. Sometimes it's very much like, well, sales has one path in mind and marketing has another path in mind, and they are growing further and further apart. Sometimes it's, well, I want to modernize my sales team, and ABM is a great strategy to do that. So how can you help me help my sales team buy into this? So we're kind of coming at it from a number of different ways, but very much believe in that, the handshake, as we call it, between sales and marketing. Because I don't know that you can really efficiently grow a B2B business today without it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think a related question is really this concept of lead scoring, right, for prioritization, because almost regardless of how big the sales team is, the sales team wants to make sure they're most efficient with their time, right? So as leads come in, they'd love to sort of know, are these the Glenn Gary leads or are these the Glenn Ross leads? Like, should I really put these at the top of my list or not? And I think some of that responsibility falls on the marketing team, like
Absolutely.
with data appending and with building models to really understand what predicts close rate, what predicts the size of the opportunity, what predicts the LTV of the opportunity. The salesperson may not care about the LTV, but the corporation does, right?
Absolutely.
And so to the extent that you can append data onto the leads at the time that they're being generated, I think that's become an area of huge opportunity, especially when sales forces are lean.
Absolutely. And I think the added power of that is it just sort of legitimizes marketing to sales teams as well, which surprisingly is still a challenge. It's not totally foreign that sales teams are, again, going after their own prospects. And your point exactly of, okay, now you're telling me to cut into what I'm already doing and prioritize these. The data will tell the story itself. And it sort of becomes irrefutable evidence to move forward. And then you can backtrack, right? Once those go through and you see all of the follow-on effect, you can start to say, okay, marketing qualified leads are actually very valuable, and here's why, and here's the impact to the business.
Great. Well, a final question really is for 2023. So is there anything that you're particularly excited about deploying for yourself, or excited that your teams are going to be deploying for customers?
A couple things. I think everybody is excited for 2023, just the sort of shake off of 2022. One of my colleagues mentioned, I'm ready for COVID to stop following us on the heels. And not that I think COVID is, but it's sort of the after effect of that. For us and our marketing team here, we're sort of operating with creative efficiency, which I think many marketing teams will be. But I've always found that you get the most interesting ideas and the actual most creativity out of marketing when you're focused on a bit more constrained resources, because it's very easy to just put budget toward whatever you need and set it and forget it. But when you actually really have to work smarter to achieve the goals, it becomes more, okay, how invested are we in the customer? What's the value? How do we orient around that? So we're very much building programs that orient around the customer value. And trying to operationalize efficiency across the board, not necessarily a do more with less, but make more of an impact with what we have. I think ABM is really picking up speed, so that should, naturally help us too. And I'm excited to see where the industry moves. I'm excited to see sort of what type of innovation comes out from a MarTech standpoint next year, and have some success.
Well, the headwinds that people face end up creating the innovation, right? To drive
exactly.
New stuff. So perhaps that'll be the silver lining if, in fact, we do hit a little bit of a road bump here.
I hope so.
Well, Sara, thanks so much for joining me and sharing your wisdom with the eMarketing Association membership.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.